Welcome to our next session on what to do when it's not working out. I'm excited to introduce Jonathan Pyle, who's with us here today. He's an EVP with Think HR. He also has about 25 years of HR experience working with both startups as well as bigger Fortune 500 companies. And so I'll turn it over to Jonathan.
Thank you. Is this working? Everybody can hear me? Thank you. All right, so I am Jonathan. It's a pleasure to talk to you today. We're going to have a very exciting topic, what to do when it's not working out, how to know when it's time for a worker to go, and what rules you need to follow. So it's my pleasure to talk to you today about this topic. I'm a card-carrying HR professional, so my first thought was, I don't do much in the day that takes only 20 minutes. I'm paid to extrapolate, conjugate, over-explain employee issues. So the good news is our friends at Intuit have given me 2 hours today instead of just 20 minutes. So it's going to be a good, exciting session. No, just kidding. We do know a few things about small businesses, though. Small businesses don't have time to work through employee separations typically, right? We know that when you're a small business owner, your top 10 priorities aren't learning how to manage an employee out of the workplace. So Think HR, this is what we do. We help small businesses every day, and we're going to try to share with you some of the lessons we've learned over the years. So the first thing we're going to talk about, and what we're going to focus a lot on, is candor. You can see my funny screen for the young folks. These were a long time ago funny comedians. And so candor, central theme, right? We think that candor is everything. Even when you're in the small stages of a startup and you're hiring friends and family, candor, 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 right? We talk, plain talk. We talk all the time. We give fluid feedback to our employees. This next quote just shows you that Jack Welch agrees with me. And Jack and I aren't close, of course, but we think a lot alike in some areas. So we believe the absence of candor is a single largest roadblock from keeping companies to be successful, and that's Fortune companies and also startups. Okay? So the question I have is, why aren't we honest with our employees? And for all these years of experience, we believe it's very simple, right? And I wouldn't say, why aren't we honest with our employees? We're honest easily with our good employees, but we have a hard time with difficult employees, problem employees. And that's because speaking about poor performance is a conflict situation. It is uncomfortable, right? Letting someone go can be devastating to them. It can be devastating to your company and their family. So these are never easy discussions. And they're even more difficult when we surprise someone. We're going to talk about how not to surprise people when it comes time to let someone go. So we're going to take this right down the middle. We're going to divide this up, we think, in topics that we can conquer quickly and easily. I believe I have 20 minutes, and then we'll save time for questions. But we're going to start with, when do you start the process? And what we say is, fall back on some of the Covey stuff, we start with the end in mind. We start with the sourcing process. We've already signed up that we're going to be candid, we're going to have honest conversations, and we're going to give feedback in a fluid fashion. So the sourcing process is where we start these candid conversations. We talk about expectations. We talk about what we expect. Constant fluid feedback. Who defines employee interactions, by the way? That's my first question for the folks here. You do. The business owner defines how employees interact with us. So we start with the end in mind. Every employee that we hire is going to leave us at some point. Very rarely in America now do employees start with a company out of school and stay there their entire career. So we start every engagement with an employee with the idea that they will probably go on to great things, but they're not going to be with us forever. So we start with the end in mind. We pay attention to the sourcing process. The hiring process. We talk again to many, many small companies. And the question is, am I too small at this point to have this structure in place? And by the way, the structure is easy. We have the checklists. We have the applications. Those tools are easily available to you. But we just ask you not to fall into that thought process that I'm too small for some structure. In this room, who uses applications, or actually who doesn't use applications in now the new hire process? Anyone? Right? So I've already talked to a few folks here that don't use applications. Why is an application important? We see resumes all day long when we hire someone. A resume is my ability to tell you why I'm right for that job. An application is actually a legal document. The applicant or the employee has to tell us what they've done, where they've been, dates of employment, what they were paid, where they went to school, did they graduate? Very useful information. It's a formality. That little bit of structure also helps someone understand that they're joining an organization with some structure and they're serious about their business. So we think applications are important. If ever we have to go back and terminate an employee and we found out that they falsified an application, isn't that an easy way to let someone go? Never been questioned, right? If someone lies about what they've done on an application, that's an easy way to let someone go and not worry about anything that comes back from that decision. So application is important. References anymore, right? We hear a lot of noise in the environment about references. Why am I going to check references? They're going to give me their best friends. Well, we can ask for additional references. So some say references are passé. We think they're still an important part of the process. References tell us a lot about someone, even after they're hired, right? What if someone's references don't call you back promptly? What if someone's references don't actually answer your questions? That tells me a lot about an applicant, doesn't it? So if you're afraid that someone's going to give their best friends or they've already prepped their references, ask for 3 additional references. But references are a nice discipline to incorporate in this hiring process. Offer letter, again, some organizations, especially the small businesses, don't think they're structured enough or large enough to have an application. Why do we think we'd want an application? I misspoke, an offer letter. Offer letter puts in place, in writing, our commitment to our employee and sets forth very clearly what the employee expects from us. So we're going to talk about what we're going to pay them, how they're classified, whether they're exempt, hourly, salary. All those designations are placed in this offer letter. And then you'll see the last bullet point, who has not heard of the at-will employment concept? Most states, just Montana now, has a little bit of control over this, has a little more structure under this at-will employment concept. But unless you have a bargaining unit in your business, and most of us in small businesses do not, at-will is a very important concept. We'll talk a little bit more about at-will when we get into the separation process. But at-will is simply, we have the right, a business owner has the right to let go of an employee at any time without notice for any reason that's not illegal, right? The employee also enjoys that privilege. They can leave you for any time, for any reason, without notice. At will, very important legal construct. We don't use that as a reason for terminating people because we don't want to work for people that say, hey, I'm going to let you go today. It's raining, I don't like you. Goodbye, see you later. It's not that. It's a legal construct that protects you. So we think that offer letter and that wording is important. So, the biggest question everyone's been asking us, how do we know when it is time to terminate an employee? I put this picture of Creed from The Office because I think as business owners, we all know when someone's not doing their job, right? Especially when you're small. You know when you have concerns. So it's rhetorical, right? When is it the right time to terminate? Well, we would say, when is the right time to talk with candor and explain to someone what the expectations are? We can terminate someone any time along this journey. But you know who the performers are, and you know who the people who don't perform are. So, what do you do? We've already signed up to have this constructive, positive feedback. So positive, yes, you're doing a great job. Constructive, hey, you can do something better. Constant, candid feedback throughout the employment relationship. When you give feedback, we talk about being issue-specific and information-specific, right? I believe that project you just completed did not meet our standards. You were late by 3 weeks. The information that we produced was not valid, and the customer was not happy with the product. Specific, right? Also what? Recent. Constant, candid information. Recent is important. Why? Has anyone ever asked you why you messed up on something 6 months ago? Right? Again, we know this is uncomfortable, but we have to be candid. We have to be in a relationship with an employee where we talk a lot. So recent's important. You don't want to get in a situation where you're frustrated with an employee. It's now time to have this performance discussion. You've talked to your lawyer, you've talked to Think HR, you're ready to go in there, and you're so frustrated that the first thing you're going to talk about is a project that wasn't done to satisfaction 6 months ago. Inherently not fair. So we want feedback to be recent. And we use I statements. We see this as well. Very powerful for the boss, the owner, to say, I believe this, I saw this. Use I statements when you can, not we statements. Unless there's 3 other people in the room with you, it's an I statement. The goal here is always to clarify expectations. Clarify, make sure an employee understands what's expected. Now, what about sandwiching messages? Has everyone heard the term sandwiching? Good example, we're all guilty of it, right? Jonathan, you did a great job the other day. I think you're doing pretty good, but you were late 10 out of the last 14 days to work. And the last project you completed for us, it really didn't meet expectations, but I know you're a good guy. I know you're going to do well. Good luck. Go get it, Jonathan. Chances are that employee walks away, I would walk away, not really understanding the gravity of the situation. So try not to always lead with positive. If we have a relationship with an employee where we are constructive and positive, we have feedback, we have the relationship, they know who you are, you can have these conversations without being so positive that someone walks away and doesn't realize that they're about to lose their job. And we see this. We see this often. Document conversations. Again, are you big enough to do this? Yes, you are. If I'm going to gather up the documents, the proof, the history to go have a performance discussion with an employee, I think it's an easy job at that point just to write the date down, the employee, the name, and document what we've talked about, right? Do I repeat that?
Do you also document the I statements?
Yes, yeah, if you can, I think so. I don't think we don't need you to complete a diary or to write a book about this, right? It needs to be fluid and a situation that you can work through the day, so you have to prepare for it. But yeah, I try to include the questions I've asked or my feedback to the candidate and what the applicant or the employee and what we really expect from them. But yes, but just don't find yourself in that trap where it's such a tedious process to document a discussion that you don't want to do it, because it's not required. Few notes are good because these are just a verbal discussion, right? We're just setting expectations. Now, the next question, which is, sure, please.
When you said to not always talk positive to let the employee know the gravity of the situation, how do you deal with an employee who diffuses the gravity by constantly bringing up excuses and basically almost always believing that the excuses work?
Very good question. Everybody heard the question? So, very good question, very common question. So, I believe that when you're going to speak with an employee about a performance concern, it's one of the first or second conversations you have. I think it's fair to go through that routine, right? You want to hear someone, you want to hear what their opinions are, you want to work through that process to clearly understand what their opinion is and what they believe has really happened. Now, there are those employees and there are all those people in the world where no matter what you say, there's going to be the other excuse, there's going to be the rationale. I'm going to tell you why this happened, right? And we're going to talk a little bit as we get, actually the next phase here is when do you move to written warnings? So when I say don't be positive, I don't mean be mean-spirited, right? But sometimes being positive gets in the way of an employee understanding the message. And sometimes on those employees when the statement is, hey, I got so much going on, we're a startup, I have 30 things to do today, I can't possibly get 30 things done, what am I going to do? You're asking too much of me. I already worked Saturday and Sunday, I'm giving you everything I got, what am I going to do? And those are good conversations because we can say, right, the top 5 priorities are this. You have 20 additional hitting you like all of us do in this environment. But if you get these 5 done, I think we're going to be okay. Clarify expectations. Help them manage that. But I don't want to get in the habit of having a weekly talk with this employee and going through this rationale where, I got a business to run. Another hour talk with this employee, right? So at some point, you got to move that process along. And the question always is, when do discussions fail? When do we move that process? Do I have to follow a structured protocol? Do I have to do verbal, written, final? And we say no. You're a small business. You're not in the business of meeting with employees all day long. You need to make sure you have the freedom to have honest discussions, candid discussions. And we say that when discussions fail because the behavior continues, we move to a written warning. Written warnings are magical. They're not fun, but they really do produce the clarity that we want, right? We always say, if you're one of my clients or if I'm helping you, we always have terminology such as, if your performance does not improve immediately in a sustained fashion, additional corrective action will happen up to and including termination. someone reads that, and they see that, and they sign a document with that kind of language on it, we're going to reach them. We're not going to surprise them at the end of the day. They're going to understand that they are being called in to increase their performance, to get better, to do what we ask, and it's a very serious situation this way. So when discussions fail, i.e. behavior continues, we move to written warnings, and you can call it a letter of concern, you can call it a final warning. What you call it doesn't matter. The idea is that you say, here's a summary of what we're trying to correct, here's what I need you to do to change that, here's what we expect. And by the way, if this behavior continues, if you can't sustain the improvement that we're talking about in this write-up, additional corrective action follows up to and including termination. And that way, at least now we're talking honestly, and people know what's at stake. We want to avoid surprises at all times, and what I say that is that we know from experience, years and years now in both large companies and small companies, a lot of business owners and business executives worry about being sued. I want to be candid. I want to have great conversations, but I don't know what my rights are. I don't want to step over the boundaries. I don't want to get in trouble. If you're candid and you're honest and you're issue specific, you're not going to get in trouble. We want to avoid surprising employees. The worst thing you can ever do is sit an employee down and terminate them, and they didn't know it was coming. That's when employees become humiliated. That's when they don't feel like they've been respected. That's when someone pursues you, typically. So this candid approach, this starting with the end in mind, sourcing, hiring, everyday work, employees need to know that they're not producing the results that you desire if that is so. And we avoid surprises. The consequences are simple. A surprised, humiliated, upset employee is going to have anger towards you. And it does not have to be that way. Yes, a question in the back.
Money. Can you hold them responsible for that?
That's a difficult question to answer without a lot of specifics, but going back to employees and trying to retrieve monies for losses incurred because of their performance is inherently very difficult to do and usually not done.
The reason I ask, I knew someone that worked for one of the casinos, and they had a policy that if you cost the casino X number of dollars the first time you were written up, and then if you cost the casino another sum of money, at some point in time they had a sum designated where you were terminated.
Casino was in which state?
Well, they aren't in a state.
It was what now?
Well, they aren't in a state, aren't they? Aren't they on like independent land or something of that sort?
Well, casinos, why I say is that another thing to understand, I think, which is important to talk about, is that states try to control as much of the employment relationship as they can. So there's a lot of that in Vegas, in some of the states that are less structured than California in their employment law. And
This particular casino was actually on an Indian reservation.
Yeah.
But
okay.
It was the concept of an employee costing you a sum of money that you can actually calculate. Could you hold the employee accountable for reimbursement?
So we would flip that around. We would say that if a casino, a multi-million-dollar organization, has that policy in place, and it's on a reservation or if it's in a different state, I'm sure they vetted that through the legal channels, right? So I'm sure they can. Now, the question typically comes, how do you actually collect that money, right? Typically, you can't collect monies from final pay. You can't take monies from paychecks. But they're all very different. And the federal law and the laws that are applied to Indian reservations, that's an area that we're not going to know a lot about unless we really look into it. But I'm sure it was legal. The question I always ask is, do you want to work at a place like that? How we treat someone and how we cultivate culture and organizations is very different than the letter of the law. But I don't have a solid answer for you, but I'm sure it was legal. They're going to be challenged on that. And they're a large organization with lots to lose if they're not walking through the structure of the law.
So what happens in case if an employee steals some stuff and is an employer be able to get it from their final check? They can deduct it or
No.
they can sign it?
Again, we always would say, the question was, if someone steals from you, an employee steals from you, can you deduct monies from their final pay to reimburse you for the lost goods or the lost services? And we certainly know in California and most states that is not happening. You don't take final pay from anyone for any reason. That is a different construct, and we're not allowed to do that. So especially most of you are California-based today. If you're in California, let's not do that. right? Because you will be held, the wage and hour laws are pretty structured here. So yes, the short answer is no. Some states that might be possible, but I've not heard of that. And our hotline services 50 states, continental states. So I believe that's not a wise move. Yes, ma'am.
In response to that gentleman's question, you can file legal charges, though.
Sure.
You can file theft, or it could be grand theft, depending on the dollar amount. And then that's happened in places where I've worked. And then as part, if they are proven guilty or they plead no contest, that's part of their sentence, is that they have to pay back. That's,
Yes, you can always pursue civilly.
Avenues.
Yes, civilly and also in the criminal courts. But that's also hard, right? Trying to run a business and someone stole $300 worth, or you're really going to go to small claims, But a lot of times it's large amounts of money. But you can't take money from final pay. That's not a smart thing. All right. Yes, ma'am.
So let's say an employee taken more PTO time than he or she has, and then quit.
So yes. So even then, it's a difficult proposition, right? So organizations should have policies or practices, right, that say you can't take PTO, you can't take vacation that's past your, if you haven't accrued it, you can't take it. Right, but so those types of specific questions we always work on case by case basis. Also, but PTO, all those things. Just know that when you're talking about taking monies from a final paycheck, it's a sticky wicket. It's something that we're careful with. It's something that we look at. I'd say, hey, you know what? Call Think HR's hotline, and one of our advisors would research that by state and provide you the legislation to provide you an answer. But it's always a pause to think about. Final pay is pretty sacred, and employees' pay is important. You want to continue on? Yes?
Yeah.
All right. Let me get through a few more slides, and we'll open up for questions, guys. That's all I need. Perfect. So, the day comes. Separation, right? What do I do? What do we say? If we've been talking to the employee the entire time, performance isn't a secret. It's an easier conversation. But we have these nuggets of truth for you. Last conversations are short, always. If you're working through an employee's performance situation and it's now the day that they're losing their job, that conversation needs to be short. It's going to be emotional. If the person rationalizes, those rationalizations are going to come back out. The decision has been made at this point. We talk about a professional exit. We talk about, hey, the decision's been made. I actually have your final paycheck. We've talked about this for some time now. The day is here. Let's move forward. Right? At-will concept, please don't fall back on that. Why am I getting fired? Well, you know what? It's at-will. I don't got to tell you. I can fire you anyway, right? Because, you can fire someone at will as long as it's not illegal. But that's not the reason. You know the reason. The employee knows the reason. Talk about it. But keep it short. We're talking 5 minutes. The longer you talk, the longer those conversations roll, the more emotional they get, the more you say that you didn't want to say. Keep it short. After the separation, we document, right? We have the documentation. We just make that file. And we keep it in your desk under lock key, right? Why? Employee actions might come 12 months later. We've already moved on. We're doing something else. So if you have notes, just put them in an investigative file, put it in your desk, and lock it up for a rainy day, right? People ask about 2-week notice. You do not have to give someone 2-week notice. There's no law around that. Someone can offer to give you 2 weeks' notice. You actually don't have to allow that as well. But just know that 2 weeks' notices are not required if you're terminating someone. Final pay requirements, know those down straight, right? States have very specific requirements. California, you terminate someone, the check is due when? Same day, right then. If someone resigns in California, that resignation, you still owe them when? 72 hours, final pay. Texas, next payroll. So very different. But there are always penalties associated with not paying someone on time. Do not get pinged for those late time penalties because you didn't have your knowledge straight on the state laws. States control final pay. I'm a California-based company. I have an employee in Texas. Texas rules apply on final pay. I'm a New York company. I have employees in California. Final pay rules apply in California. release agreements and severance. I just say this because we have very kind-hearted business owners that give monies to people for transition, right? I'm letting you go today. I know this is a tough time. I'm going to give you 3 weeks' worth of compensation to transition into your new job. We never give money away without getting a signed release, a quid pro quo agreement. I'm giving you this, and for this, you're signing away your rights to take action against me and sue me. It's just smart business. We do not do that. If I'm going to give someone transition pay, I'm going to have them sign their rights away so they can't come back at me later, because the other lesson we've learned over the years is if it's an ugly separation, no amount of money is going to make that employee happy. You can give them 2 weeks, they're not happy. You can give them 2 months, they're not happy. They're still angry. So release documents when you're giving severance. All right. We can open up for questions. This is Think HR.
I think we have time for one question.
I'm sorry, guys. We actually have a booth, and I'm in the Consultant Cove, so we can talk afterwards, okay? Yes, sir.
When's the best time to give a written warning? When's the best time to get a written warning? And especially in regards to a medium or top performer who makes a critical error.
So if you have a great performer and they've made a critical error, and it's a one-time error, I would question giving them a final warning, right? We can give final warnings when we want to. And if you think that final warning is going to have a positive effect on that person, or if you think this is a person that you're going to manage out, those are very two different equations. If I might have to manage someone out, a written warning might be necessary. But if someone made an honest mistake, a lot of us want employees that take risks and make mistakes. And so you can give a written warning whenever you want, is the short answer, but I would always just think about the consequences, because if I have a great employee and they make a mistake, got it, it's worth a discussion. It's worth learning from our mistakes, but I don't want to give someone such a structured warning that they're afraid they're going to lose their job next time they do anything wrong, because I've dampened a great, bright star in my organization. So,
even if that's a terminatable offense to another employee in history?
Well, we try to treat everyone on a level playing field, right? So you're exactly right. So you would want to treat everyone the same. But again, I wouldn't want that practice, right? If someone made an honest mistake, one person, 3 people, I'd try to make sure that they understood the merits of the case and why they made the mistake and not to do it again. But I wouldn't damper that. I want to work for you. I want to make you money. I want to make you successful. But we do want to treat people fairly consistently across the playing field. Thanks, guys.